The scent of rotting vegetables and discarded meat filled Nora Zimmerman's nostrils as she crouched behind the Grand Hotel in Oklahoma City, her fingers trembling as she reached for a half-eaten biscuit someone had thrown into the refuse pile. The summer heat of 1882 beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of the Oklahoma Territory, and hunger had driven her to places she never imagined she would go. 3 days without a proper meal had stripped away whatever pride she had left after losing her position as a seamstress when the dress shop closed its doors for good. Her dark brown hair hung limp and tangled around her shoulders, and her once neat calico dress bore stains and tears that spoke of her rapid descent into desperation. She had just brought the stale biscuit to her lips when a deep voice startled her so badly she dropped it back into the dirt. "Madam, that is not fit for any person to eat." Nora looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun, and saw a tall man standing at the corner of the building. He was broad-shouldered and weathered, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and blue eyes that held something she had not seen directed at her in weeks: genuine concern. He wore clean work clothes, a leather vest, and boots that had seen honest labor but were well maintained. A black hat sat on his head, pushed back slightly as he regarded her with an expression that made her want to simultaneously run away and burst into tears. "I apologize for disturbing you," Nora said quickly, starting to stand. Her legs shook beneath her, and she had to brace herself against the rough wooden wall of the hotel. "I will move along." "Wait," the man said, holding up one hand. "I did not mean to chase you off. My name is Benjamin Porter. I own a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. I came in for supplies and was cutting through to the livery when I saw you here." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Nora's cheeks burned with shame. She was 22 years old, educated enough to read and write, and had always worked honestly for her living. To be discovered scavenging like a stray dog was almost more than she could bear. "I do not see how that is your concern, Mr. Porter." "You are right. It is not my concern." He stepped closer, and she noticed he moved slowly, as if trying not to frighten a wounded animal. "But I am making it my concern anyway. The restaurant across the street serves a decent meal. Would you allow me to buy you dinner?" "I am not a charity case," Nora said, though her stomach cramped painfully at the mere mention of food. "I did not suggest you were. I am a man who is about to eat alone, and I would prefer some company. Simple as that." Benjamin's voice was matter-of-fact, neither pitying nor judgmental, and something about his straightforward manner made Nora's defenses crack just slightly. She looked down at her filthy dress and her dirt-caked fingernails. "I am not presentable for a restaurant." "Then we will go around to the back entrance, and I will have them bring the food out to one of the tables in the courtyard. No one will see you but me and the server." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you would rather I leave you to that moldy biscuit, in which case I will respect your wishes and be on my way." Nora's resolve crumbled. She was so hungry, so tired, and so utterly alone in this world. What did she have to lose by accepting this stranger's kindness? If he meant her harm, she was already in such a vulnerable position that it hardly mattered. "Thank you," she whispered. "I accept your offer." Benjamin nodded and gestured for her to follow him. They walked around the building, staying in the alley until they reached the courtyard behind the restaurant. It was a pleasant space with a few wooden tables and chairs set up beneath a canvas awning that provided shade. At this time of day, between the lunch and dinner rushes, the area was empty. "Wait here," Benjamin said, pulling out a chair for her. "I will be right back." Nora sank into the chair, her body trembling with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She watched as Benjamin disappeared through the back door of the restaurant. True to his word, he returned within minutes, accompanied by a middle-aged woman in an apron who carried a pitcher of water and 2 glasses. "Sally here is going to bring out some food," Benjamin explained, settling into the chair across from Nora. "I told her we were both hungry enough to eat a horse, so she is preparing a good spread." Sally gave Nora a kind smile that held no judgment, then poured water into both glasses. "It will be ready shortly, Mr. Porter. I will bring it out myself." As soon as the woman left, Nora reached for the water and drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. She had to force herself to slow down and not gulp it all at once. "So," Benjamin said, his tone conversational, "you said you lost your position at the dress shop. How long ago was that?" Nora set down her glass carefully. 3 weeks. Mrs. Henderson, who owned it, decided to move back east to live with her daughter. She gave me 2 weeks' notice, which was more than she was obliged to do, but I have not been able to find other work since then." "What happened to your family? Your folks?" "My mother died when I was 16. My father passed 2 years ago from pneumonia. I have no siblings, no other relatives that I know of." Nora's voice was flat, reciting facts that still pained her but that she had learned to speak without breaking down. "I have been on my own since then, but I always managed to find work. Until now." Benjamin leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Oklahoma City has grown quite a bit in the last few years, but that also means more people competing for the same jobs. It is not an easy place for a woman alone." "No," Nora agreed. "It is not." Sally returned then, carrying a large tray laden with food. Nora's eyes widened at the sight of it. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, fresh bread with butter, green beans, and even a slice of apple pie. It was more food than she had seen in weeks, and the aroma made her head spin. "Thank you, Sally," Benjamin said, and the woman nodded before heading back inside. "Please," Benjamin said, gesturing to the food. "Help yourself." Nora did not need to be told twice. She reached for the chicken with trembling hands, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity, even as her body screamed at her to devour everything in sight. The first bite was heaven, the crispy skin and tender meat flooding her mouth with flavor. She had to force herself to chew slowly, to not make herself sick by eating too quickly. Benjamin filled his own plate but ate at a measured pace, watching her with those observant blue eyes. "Take your time," he said quietly. "There is plenty, and no one is going to take it away from you." Something about his words, the gentle understanding in them, made tears prick at the corners of Nora's eyes. She blinked them away fiercely, focusing on the plate in front of her. They ate in silence for several minutes, the sounds of the town filtering into the courtyard, horses whinnying, wagon wheels creaking, voices calling out to one another in the street. Finally, when Nora had eaten enough to take the edge off her hunger, she looked up at Benjamin. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. I could be anyone." Benjamin set down his fork and met her gaze directly. "I know what it is like to be alone and struggling. When I was 19, I lost my parents and my younger brother to scarlet fever. I inherited the ranch, but I barely knew how to run it. I made mistakes, lost money, came close to losing the whole place more than once. There were people in town who helped me when they did not have to. I figure I owe it to the world to do the same when I can." "I am sorry about your family," Nora said softly. "It was 7 years ago now. The pain fades, but you never really stop missing them." He picked up his glass and took a drink. "I have been running the ranch alone since then. It is a decent spread with about 200 head of cattle and enough land to sustain them. I have 2 hired hands who help with the heavy work, but I could use someone to manage the house." Nora's heart began to beat faster. "Are you offering me a position?" "I am offering you an opportunity to consider a position." Benjamin corrected. I need someone who can cook, clean, maybe help with some of the bookkeeping if you have a head for numbers. In exchange, you would have a room in the ranch house, 3 meals a day, and a fair wage. It is hard work, and the ranch is isolated. You would not have the society of town life, but you would be safe and provided for. Nora's mind raced. This was either an incredible stroke of luck or a trap of some kind. She studied Benjamin's face, trying to read his intentions. He looked back at her with an openness that was almost disarming, no hint of lechery or deception in his expression. "Why would you offer this to a complete stranger?" she asked. "You know nothing about me. I could be a terrible cook or a thief." "You could be," Benjamin acknowledged. "But I do not think you are. I have always been a decent judge of character, and my gut tells me you are exactly what you appear to be. A good woman who has fallen on hard times through no fault of her own. As for being strangers, well, everyone is a stranger until they are not. We can remedy that with conversation and time. What if I accept and it does not work out? Then I will pay you for the time you worked and bring you back to town. No hard feelings." Benjamin's voice was calm and reasonable. "I am not trying to trap you, Miss Zimmerman. I am trying to help us both. I need someone reliable at the ranch and you need a job. It seems like a fair exchange." Nora looked down at her plate, at the food she had eaten, the first full meal she had enjoyed in far too long. She thought about the last 3 weeks, sleeping in a boarding house until her money ran out, then spending nights in the hayloft of a stable until the owner discovered her and chased her off. The past 2 nights she had dozed fitfully in alleyways, always alert for danger, always cold despite the summer heat. The thought of a real bed, a roof over her head, and steady work was almost too good to contemplate. "I accept your offer, Mr. Porter," she said, meeting his eyes again. "When would you like me to start? How about today?" Benjamin smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "I have finished my business in town, and I can pick up a few extra supplies we might need." "You do not have any belongings to collect, I assume?" "No," Nora admitted. "Everything I owned was sold to pay for my room and board while I looked for work. All I have left are the clothes I am wearing. Then we will need to stop by the general store and get you some proper things. Work dresses, an apron, maybe a coat for when the weather turns. Whatever you need." Nora's throat tightened. "Mr. Porter, I cannot possibly accept more charity from you. The meal is already too much." "It is not charity. It is an advance on your wages. You cannot work on the ranch in a torn dress, so it is a practical matter." Benjamin stood and pulled out her chair as she rose. "Besides, you can pay me back a little each month if it makes you feel better about it." "Yes," Nora said quickly. "I will pay you back every cent, I promise." "I believe you." Benjamin gestured toward the back door of the restaurant. "Let me settle up with Sally and then we can head to the store." The next hour passed in a blur for Nora. Benjamin took her to the general store where a kind woman named Mrs. Cooper helped her select 3 practical dresses, undergarments, a warm shawl, a nightgown, and sturdy boots. He also purchased fabric, thread, and sewing supplies, explaining that Nora would have time in the evenings to make additional clothing if she wished. Mrs. Cooper wrapped everything in brown paper and tied it with string, and Benjamin carried the packages as they headed to the livery where he had left his wagon. The wagon was loaded with supplies: sacks of flour and sugar, cans of coffee and beans, tools, and other necessities for ranch life. Benjamin helped Nora up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Oklahoma City, Nora watched the buildings grow smaller behind them, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake or if her luck was finally changing. The landscape around them was open and vast. rolling prairie grassland dotted with occasional stands of trees. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Despite everything, Nora felt a small flutter of hope in her chest. Whatever happened next, at least she was no longer alone and starving behind a hotel. "The ranch is called the Porter Place," Benjamin said as they drove. "Not very creative, I know, but it has been in my family since before I was born. My father came out here in the late 50s and claimed the land. He built it up from nothing, and I have been trying to honor that legacy." He glanced at her. "It is a good place, even if it is a bit lonely." "How often do you come into town?" Nora asked. "Once a month for supplies, sometimes more if there is business to attend to. The two hands who work for me, Jack and Samuel, they live in the bunkhouse on the property. Good men, both of them. Jack is older, maybe 50 or so, been working cattle all his life. Samuel is younger, about your age I would guess. They keep to themselves mostly, and they will treat you with respect or answer to me." Nora nodded, filing away this information. "And what exactly would my duties be?" "Cooking 3 meals a day for me and the hands, keeping the main house clean, laundry when needed. I have let things slide a bit since my mother passed, and the house could use a woman's touch. If you know how to preserve food, that would be helpful too. We have a good garden, and sometimes we slaughter a steer for meat. My mother used to can vegetables and fruit, but I never learned the skill properly." "I know how to do that," Nora said. "My mother taught me before she died. I can make butter and cheese too if you have a cow for milking." "We have 2 milk cows," Benjamin said, looking pleased. "I have been selling the extra milk to a neighbor, but having butter and cheese would be better. You know, I think this arrangement is going to work out well for both of us." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Nora found herself studying Benjamin's profile from the corner of her eye. He had a strong jaw and a straight nose, with weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of competence and reliability that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. As the sun sank lower, they crested a rise and Benjamin pointed ahead. "There it is, the Porter Place." Nora looked and saw a collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. The main house was a 2-story structure built of wood painted white, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. There was a large barn painted red, several smaller outbuildings, and what must be the bunkhouse Benjamin had mentioned. A windmill stood near the barn, its blades turning slowly in the evening breeze. Fences divided the land into sections, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. "It is beautiful," Nora said, meaning it. "It is home," Benjamin replied simply. As they approached, 2 men emerged from the barn. The older one was grizzled and bow-legged, while the younger was tall and lean with dark hair. Both looked curiously at Nora as Benjamin pulled the wagon to a stop. "Jack, Samuel, this is Miss Nora Zimmerman," Benjamin announced. "She will be working as my housekeeper starting today. Miss Zimmerman, these are the men I mentioned." "Madam," both men said, touching their hat brims. "Please call me Nora," she said, smiling nervously. "Miss Nora, then," Jack said in a gravelly voice. "Welcome to the ranch. Help me unload these supplies," Benjamin told the men, "and then Miss Nora will need to get settled in the house." The 3 men made quick work of unloading the wagon while Nora stood to the side, feeling uncertain about what she should be doing. Benjamin finally gathered up her packages and gestured for her to follow him to the house. The front door opened into a spacious parlor with worn but comfortable-looking furniture. Dust covered every surface, and Nora could see cobwebs in the corners. Through a doorway, she glimpsed a kitchen with a large cast-iron stove and a scarred wooden table. Stairs led up to the second floor. "I know it is a mess," Benjamin said, sounding apologetic. "Like I said, I have let things go." "I have seen worse," Nora assured him, though in truth the place would need a thorough cleaning. "Let me show you your room." Benjamin led her upstairs and down a short hallway. He opened a door to reveal a modest bedroom with a single bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a small window that looked out over the front yard. "It is not fancy, but the bed is comfortable. My mother used this room for sewing before she passed." "It is perfect," Nora said, setting her packages on the bed. "Thank you, Mr. Porter." "Benjamin," he said. "If we are going to be living under the same roof, working together, we should use first names. Is that all right with you?" "Yes, of course. Benjamin." The name felt strange on her tongue, too familiar, and yet somehow right. "Good. Now, I imagine you are tired, but I should show you around the kitchen so you know where everything is. Tomorrow you can start properly, but tonight I can manage to throw together a simple supper for all of us." Nora shook her head. "You have done enough for me today. The least I can do is cook dinner. That is what you are paying me for, after all." Benjamin looked like he might argue, but then he nodded. "All right. Let me give you the tour of the kitchen, and then I will let you work." The kitchen was spacious with good light from a large window. The stove was well made and clearly maintained, and there was a hand pump at the sink that brought water from a well. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with various dry goods. A door led to a pantry where Nora found more supplies, including smoked meat hanging from hooks in the ceiling. "This is more than adequate," Nora said, already mentally planning a meal. "I can make biscuits, fry some of that bacon, and there are canned vegetables we can heat up. Maybe some gravy. It will not be fancy, but it will be filling." "Sounds like a feast to me," Benjamin said. "I will be in the barn helping Jack and Samuel with the evening chores. Ring the bell on the porch when supper is ready and we will come up." After he left, Nora stood in the center of the kitchen and took a deep breath. This morning she had been scrounging for scraps behind a hotel, and now she was standing in a real kitchen, about to cook a meal in her new position. It felt like a dream, and she half expected to wake up back in that alley. But this was real. The stove was real, the food was real, and the opportunity Benjamin had given her was real. She rolled up her sleeves, pumped some water into a basin to wash her hands, and got to work. Cooking felt good, familiar. She mixed flour and lard for biscuits, sliced bacon and set it to frying, opened jars of green beans and corn to heat on the stove. As she worked, she felt some of the tension of the past weeks begin to drain from her shoulders. This was something she knew how to do, something she was good at. By the time the sun had fully set, she had a meal prepared. The biscuits were golden brown, the bacon crispy, the vegetables steaming hot. She had even made gravy from the bacon drippings. She found the bell Benjamin had mentioned, a large brass bell mounted on a post near the porch railing, and rang it loudly. Within minutes, all three men appeared, washing up at a basin by the back door before filing into the kitchen. The table was set with mismatched plates and cutlery Nora had found in the cupboards, and she had put everything out in serving dishes so the men could help themselves. "My word," Jack said, staring at the spread. "I cannot remember the last time we had a meal like this." "Sit, please," Nora said, gesturing to the chairs. She felt suddenly nervous, hoping the food would meet their expectations. Benjamin took a seat at the head of the table, with Jack and Samuel on either side. Nora started to retreat, thinking she would eat after they were done, but Benjamin stopped her. "There is a fourth chair, Nora. We all work on this ranch and we all eat together." She hesitated, then took the remaining seat. It felt strange to be sitting at a table with these men, sharing a meal as if she belonged here. But Benjamin began passing dishes around, and soon everyone was filling their plates and eating. The men ate with the focused intensity of people who had done hard physical labor all day, and the food disappeared rapidly. "Miss Nora," Samuel said after swallowing a mouthful of biscuit, "this is the best meal I have had in months. These biscuits are light as clouds." "Thank you," Nora said, feeling a warm glow of pride. "Better than anything I have ever cooked, that is for certain," Benjamin added. "I think we are all going to benefit from your presence here." After dinner, the men helped clear the table without being asked, then excused themselves to the bunkhouse. Benjamin lingered, watching as Nora began washing the dishes. "You should rest," he said. "It has been a long day for you." "I need to clean up first," Nora replied, scrubbing a plate. "I was taught that a kitchen should always be left clean." "Then let me help." Benjamin picked up a towel and began drying the dishes she washed, stacking them neatly on the counter. They worked in companionable silence, and Nora found herself acutely aware of Benjamin's presence beside her. He was so close she could smell the scent of hay and leather that clung to his clothes, mixed with something that was uniquely him. It was not unpleasant, quite the opposite actually. "I meant what I said earlier," Benjamin said after a while. "I am glad you are here. The ranch has felt empty for too long." "I am glad too," Nora admitted. "This morning I did not know where I would sleep tonight or where my next meal would come from. You have given me more than just a job, Benjamin. You have given me hope." He turned to look at her, and their eyes met. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding or connection that made Nora's breath catch. Then Benjamin smiled gently and turned back to his drying. "We are going to do just fine, you and I." That night, Nora lay in the unfamiliar bed in her new room, clean sheets beneath her and a roof over her head. Her stomach was full for the first time in weeks, and she wore the new nightgown Benjamin had bought her. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the vast Oklahoma sky, more stars than she had ever seen in town where the lights obscured them. She thought about Benjamin, about his kindness, and the way he had treated her with such dignity when he had found her at her lowest point. She thought about the warmth in his blue eyes and the gentle strength in his hands. It was too soon to call what she felt anything more than gratitude, but there was something else there too, something that made her heart beat a little faster when he looked at her. Nora closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever force had brought Benjamin Porter into that alley at exactly the right moment. Then she drifted off to sleep, feeling safer and more content than she had in a very long time. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Nora woke before dawn each day and started breakfast for the men, who ate early before heading out to work with the cattle. She spent her mornings cleaning the ranch house, tackling one room at a time until the entire place gleamed. The afternoons were devoted to laundry, mending, and cooking. She made butter from the milk of the two cows, whose names she learned were Bessie and Mabel, and she started working on making cheese as well. Benjamin was right that the ranch was isolated, but Nora found she did not mind. After the desperation and fear of her time in Oklahoma City, the quiet peace of the ranch was a balm to her soul. She took pride in her work, in the way the house began to look and feel like a home again. She cleaned windows until they sparkled, beat the dust from rugs, and even scrubbed the wooden floors until they shone. Benjamin seemed to notice every improvement. He would comment on how good the house smelled when he came in for dinner, or how nice it was to have clean curtains in the windows. Sometimes Nora would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something thoughtful and almost tender. For her part, Nora found herself thinking about Benjamin more than was probably appropriate for an employer-employee relationship. She noticed things: The way his hair curled at his collar when it got too long, the strength in his hands when he carried something heavy, the sound of his laugh when Jack told a joke at dinner. She noticed that he was patient with the animals and fair with his men. She noticed that he always made sure everyone else had enough to eat before taking seconds himself. One afternoon, about a month after Nora's arrival, she was working in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds and checking on the vegetables that were thriving in the summer sun. The work was hot and tiring, but she enjoyed being outdoors, feeling the earth under her fingers. She had tied her hair back with a ribbon and rolled up her sleeves, and she was humming an old song her mother used to sing. She did not hear Benjamin approach until he spoke. "The garden looks better than it has in years." Nora looked up, shading her eyes from the sun. Benjamin stood a few feet away, his hat in his hands, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "Thank you. Your mother must have planted well originally. The soil is good here." She did. She loved this garden. Benjamin moved closer, looking at the neat rows of beans, tomatoes, squash, and carrots. "I have neglected it since she passed. I am glad to see it thriving again." Nora stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You must miss her very much." "Every day." Benjamin's voice was quiet. "She was the heart of this place. After she died, it felt like the ranch lost its soul somehow. I kept working because that is what you do, but it was just going through the motions." "And now?" Nora asked softly. Benjamin met her eyes. "Now it feels like a home again. Like there is a reason to do more than just survive." He paused, then added, "You have made a difference here, Nora. I hope you know that." Nora felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "I am only doing my job. You are doing much more than that." Benjamin took a step closer. "You are doing exactly what I did not even know I needed." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Nora's heart pounded in her chest, and she found herself unable to look away from Benjamin's blue eyes. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Before either of them could speak, Samuel's voice called out from near the barn. "Boss, that fence in the north pasture has a break. Jack says we need to fix it before the cattle find it." The spell was broken. Benjamin blinked and took a step back, settling his hat back on his head. "I will be right there," he called back. To Nora he said, "I should go, but we should talk sometime, about things beyond work and the ranch." "I would like that," Nora managed to say. Benjamin nodded, gave her one more long look, and then strode off toward the barn. Nora watched him go, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed them against her warm cheeks. Something was building between them, something that both excited and frightened her. She was not naive enough to mistake kindness for love, but there was more than kindness in the way Benjamin looked at her now. There was interest, attraction, perhaps even the beginnings of deeper feelings. The question was, what did she feel? Gratitude, certainly. Respect, admiration, a growing affection that made her smile when he entered a room. But was it more than that? Could it be more than that? Nora did not have answers, but as she returned to her weeding, she found herself hoping that the conversation Benjamin had mentioned would happen sooner rather than later. That evening, after dinner had been served and cleaned up, and Jack and Samuel had retired to the bunkhouse, Benjamin asked Nora to join him on the porch. The sun had set, and the sky was awash with the deep purple of twilight. The sounds of crickets and distant cattle filled the air, along with the gentle creak of the porch swing as Benjamin sat down on it. Nora settled beside him, leaving a respectable distance between them. For a few moments, they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "I was not entirely honest with you when we first met," Benjamin said finally. Nora's stomach clenched with apprehension. "What do you mean?" "I did not just happen to be cutting through that alley. I saw you earlier in the day, trying to find work. I watched you go into 3 different shops and come out looking more defeated each time. When I finished my business, I went looking for you. I found you behind that hotel, and I knew I had to do something. Nora absorbed this information. Why did you lie about it? Because I thought you might refuse my help if you knew I had sought you out deliberately. You had your pride, even in the midst of your desperation. I respected that, but I also knew you needed help whether you wanted to admit it or not. Benjamin turned to look at her. I hope you are not angry. I am not angry, Nora said slowly. I am grateful. If you had not found me, I do not know what would have become of me. She paused, then asked, But why? Why did you care what happened to a stranger? Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting back to the horizon. When my family died, I was lost. I had always expected my father to be there, teaching me, guiding me. Suddenly, I was alone with a ranch to run and no idea what I was doing. I made mistakes that cost me dearly, and there were times I thought I would lose everything. But you did not lose it, Nora pointed out. No, thanks to a few people who took the time to help me. Old Mr. Crawford, who owned the ranch to the east, he taught me about managing cattle. Mrs. Bishop in town, she extended me credit at her store when I was so far in debt I could barely see straight. They had no reason to help me, but they did anyway. They saved me, and in doing so they taught me something important. What was that? That we are all just stumbling through this life, doing the best we can. And sometimes the best thing we can do is reach out a hand to someone who needs it. Benjamin turned to her again, and even in the dim light she could see the sincerity in his eyes. When I saw you that day, I saw myself 7 years ago. Alone, scared, not sure where to turn, I could not walk away from that. I would not. Nora felt tears prick at her eyes. You are a good man, Benjamin Porter. I try to be, but Nora, I need you to know something else. He shifted slightly, angling his body toward hers. These past weeks, having you here, it has been more than just having help around the ranch. I find myself looking forward to mealtimes, not just for the food but for your company. I listen for your voice in the house. I notice when you smile. He took a deep breath. What I am trying to say, and doing a poor job of it, is that my feelings for you have grown beyond those of an employer. Nora's heart was racing now, her breath coming quick and shallow. Benjamin, let me finish, please. I know our situation is complicated. You work for me, you depend on me for your livelihood, and that creates an imbalance. I would never want you to feel pressured or obligated to return my feelings. If you do not share them, I will respect that, and nothing needs to change. You will always have a place here, a job, a home. I promise you that. But if you do share them, he continued, his voice dropping lower, if there is any chance that you might care for me the way I am coming to care for you, then I would like the opportunity to court you properly. To see if what is growing between us could become something lasting. Nora stared at him, her mind whirling. Everything he had said resonated with her own confused feelings of the past weeks. She had been drawn to him from that first day, and not just because he had rescued her from a terrible situation. There was something about Benjamin that called to her, his quiet strength, his kindness, the loneliness in his eyes that matched her own. I do share those feelings, she said softly. I have tried not to, tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or relief at having a safe place to live. But it is more than that. When you walk into a room, my heart beats faster. When you smile at me, I feel warm all over. When you speak of courting me, I want nothing more than to say yes. Benjamin's face lit up with hope. Then say yes. Yes, Nora whispered. Yes, I would like that very much. Benjamin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from work, warm and strong, and the touch sent a shiver through Nora's entire body. They sat like that, hands clasped, looking at each other in the gathering darkness, and Nora felt as if her entire life had been leading to this moment. "I will not rush you," Benjamin said. "We will take this as slow as you need. But I am happy, Nora, happier than I have been in a very long time." "So am I," she admitted. "I never thought I would feel this way again. After my father died, after I lost my position, I felt like I was just drifting, waiting for something bad to happen. But now, sitting here with you, I feel like maybe I was drifting toward something good instead." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their childhoods, their losses, their hopes for the future. Benjamin told her about his brother, a lively boy of 13 who had wanted to be a doctor before the fever took him. Nora told him about her mother's beautiful singing voice and her father's love of books. They talked about the ranch and its possibilities, about the cattle and the land and the dreams Benjamin had for expanding the operation. Finally, when the moon had risen high and the air had grown cool, Benjamin walked Nora to the door. At the threshold, he lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Good night, Nora," he said softly. "Good night, Benjamin." Nora floated up the stairs to her room, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, but sleep was a long time coming. Her mind kept replaying the evening, the feel of Benjamin's hand in hers, the way he had looked at her, the promise of a future that was so much brighter than anything she had dared to imagine. The courtship that followed was sweet and unhurried. Benjamin was true to his word about not rushing, and he treated Nora with a respect and tenderness that made her fall for him more deeply with each passing day. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, arranged in a jar on the kitchen table. He insisted she take Sunday afternoons off from work, and they would go for rides together in the wagon, exploring the countryside and talking about everything and nothing. Jack and Samuel figured out what was happening between them almost immediately, and both men seemed pleased. Jack started making jokes about weddings, which made Nora blush and Benjamin laugh. Samuel, who was quieter, simply told Nora one day that he was happy for them both, that Benjamin deserved some joy in his life. As summer faded into autumn, the relationship between Nora and Benjamin deepened. They had their first real kiss on a cool October evening, standing by the corral as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. Benjamin had been showing her a new colt that had been born the week before, and their hands had brushed as they both reached to pet the animal. The touch had lingered, and when Nora looked up at Benjamin, she saw such longing in his eyes that her breath caught. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Nora whispered. Benjamin cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but as Nora responded, it deepened. She felt as if she were melting, as if every nerve in her body had come alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Nora," he said. "I think I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that alley, proud and desperate and trying so hard to survive. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known." "I love you too," Nora replied, the words coming easily because they were true. "You saved me, Benjamin. Not just from hunger and homelessness, but from losing hope. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." "Then let me give you more," Benjamin said, pulling back enough to look into her eyes. "Marry me, Nora. Be my wife, my partner, the heart of this ranch and my life." "I know it has not been long, but I know my own heart. I want to spend the rest of my days with you." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, I will marry you." Benjamin swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. His whoop of joy startled the horses in the corral, and within moments, Jack and Samuel came running from the barn, looking for trouble. "Everything all right, boss?" Jack called. "Better than all right," Benjamin shouted back, setting Nora down but keeping his arm around her waist. "Miss Nora has just agreed to be my wife." Jack let out a cheer and slapped his hat against his leg. Samuel grinned wide and came over to shake Benjamin's hand and congratulate Nora. It felt like a celebration, like the whole ranch was rejoicing with them. They were married 6 weeks later, on a bright November day, in the small church in Oklahoma City. Nora wore a new dress that she had sewn herself from beautiful cream-colored fabric Benjamin had bought for her. Mrs. Cooper from the general store and her husband attended, along with several other townsfolk who knew Benjamin. Jack and Samuel served as witnesses, both men scrubbed clean and wearing their Sunday best. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. As Nora spoke her vows, promising to love and honor Benjamin for the rest of her life, she thought about how far she had come. Less than 6 months ago, she had been desperate and alone, begging for scraps in an alley. Now she stood in a church, marrying a man she loved deeply, embarking on a new life full of promise. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed her with such passion that several people in the congregation chuckled. But Nora did not care. She was married to the man she loved, and nothing else mattered. They held a small reception at the hotel restaurant, the same one where Benjamin had bought her that first meal. Sally, who had served them that day, prepared a feast. Roast beef, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread, and a beautiful cake with white frosting. Nora and Benjamin sat together, his hand covering hers on the table, accepting congratulations from their guests. As the sun began to set, they returned to the ranch, to the home they would now share as husband and wife. Benjamin carried Nora over the threshold, another whoop of joy escaping him as he spun her around in the front parlor. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Porter," Nora repeated, loving the sound of it. "I am Nora Porter now. You are. And I am the luckiest man in the Oklahoma Territory." That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Benjamin was tender and patient with Nora, mindful that this was all new to her. He took his time, making sure she felt loved and cherished, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it was everything Nora had hoped it would be. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms, talking quietly about their hopes and dreams for the future. "I want children," Benjamin said, stroking her hair. "If we are blessed with them, I want this house to be filled with laughter and life again." "I want that too," Nora agreed. "A family of our own, sons and daughters to help with the ranch and carry on what your parents started." "They would have loved you," Benjamin said softly. "My parents, they would have been so happy to see me settled with a woman like you. I wish I could have known them. They are with us in spirit, I think, watching over us, glad that the ranch is a home again." Benjamin kissed the top of her head. "Get some sleep, my love. Tomorrow we start our life together in earnest." Nora snuggled closer to him, feeling utterly safe and content. She drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, knowing that she had found where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was one of hard work and deep happiness. Nora threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, sewing curtains and quilts, filling the rooms with small touches that reflected both their personalities. She kept the garden thriving even as winter approached, canning and preserving enough vegetables to see them through the cold months. She experimented with new recipes, learning to make Benjamin's favorite foods, delighting in the way his face lit up when he came in to find supper waiting. Benjamin, for his part, was an attentive and loving husband. He never took Nora's work for granted, always thanking her for meals and complimenting her on how she maintained the household. He made sure she had everything she needed, and he consulted her on decisions regarding the ranch, valuing her opinion. At night, he held her close, and their physical relationship grew deeper and more passionate as they learned each other's bodies and desires. In the spring of 1883, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally confirmed it with the doctor in Oklahoma City, she could barely contain her excitement. She waited until that evening when she and Benjamin were alone in the parlor to share the news. "I have something to tell you," she said, setting aside her sewing and turning to face him. Benjamin looked up from the ranch ledger he had been reviewing. "What is it? You look like you are about to burst." "I am," Nora said, laughing. "Benjamin, we are going to have a baby. I am pregnant." For a moment, Benjamin simply stared at her, as if he could not quite process the words. Then a slow, wondering smile spread across his face. He set the ledger aside and crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling Nora to her feet and into his arms. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Nora confirmed, tears streaming down her face. "In late autumn, the doctor thinks. Maybe early December." Benjamin held her tightly, and she could feel him trembling. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes, too. "You have made me the happiest man alive, Nora. A child, our child. I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Nora said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Our son or daughter is in there, growing, becoming. By this time next year, we will be parents. I am going to take such good care of you," Benjamin promised. "You and our baby, you will want for nothing." "I know," Nora said simply, because she did know. Benjamin would move heaven and earth to protect his family. The pregnancy was not easy. Nora suffered from morning sickness well into her 4th month, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and tired. But Benjamin was endlessly patient and supportive. He took over some of her heavier chores, insisting that she rest more. He brought her cool drinks and fanned her when she was hot. He rubbed her feet when they swelled and held her hair when she was sick. Jack and Samuel were excited about the coming baby as well. Jack, who had grown children of his own somewhere back east, gave Nora advice about what to expect. Samuel started carving a cradle in the evenings, a beautiful piece made from oak that he presented to Nora and Benjamin with shy pride. As autumn arrived, and Nora's belly swelled with the growing life inside her, she felt a contentment deeper than anything she had known. Standing in the kitchen making preserves, or sitting on the porch swing in the cool evening air with Benjamin's hand resting on her stomach feeling the baby kick, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed. From starvation and despair to this, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a child on the way. "What should we name him or her?" Benjamin asked one evening as they lay in bed together, his hand tracing gentle circles on Nora's belly. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him after your father," Nora said. "What was his name?" Thomas Henry Porter." Benjamin's voice was soft. "He would be honored, I think." "And if it is a girl, I like the name Sarah," Benjamin said. "It was my mother's name, but only if you agree." "Sarah Porter," Nora said, testing it out. "Or Thomas Porter. Either way, they will be loved beyond measure." The baby came on a cold December night in the midst of a light snowfall. Nora's labor started just after supper, and Benjamin immediately rode to town to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Cooper, who had experience as a midwife. By the time they returned, Nora's contractions were strong and regular. Benjamin wanted to stay with her, but Mrs. Cooper shooed him out of the room. "This is women's work," she said firmly. "You go pace downstairs with the other men and let us do what needs doing." The labor was long and difficult. Nora had never experienced such pain, and there were moments when she was sure she could not endure another contraction. But Mrs. Cooper and the doctor coached her through it, and finally, just as the first gray light of dawn was breaking, the baby emerged with a lusty cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Cooper announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." Nora collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. The doctor cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Nora's arms. She looked down at the red-faced, crying infant and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, Thomas," she whispered. "Hello, my beautiful boy." Mrs. Cooper opened the door and called downstairs. "Mr. Porter, you can come up now. You have a son." Benjamin took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild. But when he saw Nora holding the baby, his expression transformed into one of pure wonder. He approached the bed slowly, as if afraid he might break the spell. "A son?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Your son," Nora confirmed. "Thomas Henry Porter, just as we discussed. He is perfect, Benjamin." "Absolutely perfect." Benjamin sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny bundle in Nora's arms. The baby had stopped crying and was now looking around with unfocused eyes. Benjamin reached out with one finger and stroked the baby's cheek, and Thomas immediately turned toward the touch, his little mouth opening. "He is so small," Benjamin marveled. "I am afraid I will break him." "You will not," the doctor assured him. "Babies are tougher than they look. Here, why don't you hold your son?" Carefully, awkwardly, Benjamin took the baby from Nora. Thomas looked impossibly tiny in his father's strong arms, but Benjamin held him with such gentleness and reverence that Nora felt tears prick her eyes once again. Benjamin stared down at his son with an expression of absolute devotion. "Hello, Thomas," he said softly. "I am your papa, and I promise you I will do everything in my power to give you a good life. You will grow up loved and safe, with a home and land and parents who would do anything for you." The baby made a small sound, almost like a coo, and Benjamin laughed through his tears. "Did you hear that, Nora? He knows my voice already." "Of course he does," Nora said. "You talked to him every night while he was growing inside me. He knows both of us." The doctor and Mrs. Cooper left soon after, satisfied that both mother and baby were healthy. Benjamin refused to leave Nora's side, insisting on staying in the room even though she told him she was fine. He sat in a chair beside the bed, holding Thomas, watching him sleep with an expression of such wonder that Nora felt her love for her husband deepen even further. "Thank you," Benjamin said without looking up from the baby. "Thank you for this gift, Nora. For our son, for making me a father, for giving me a family. I never thought I would have this again after I lost my parents and brother." "We have made this family together," Nora replied. "And we will raise him together, teach him together, love him together. He is ours, Benjamin, our miracle." The first weeks of Thomas's life were exhausting but joyful. Nora had never known she could function on so little sleep, but somehow she managed. Benjamin helped as much as he could, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried, changing his cloths and bringing him to Nora for feedings. The baby thrived, growing chubby and healthy, his eyes beginning to focus and track movement. Jack and Samuel doted on the baby, taking turns holding him and making silly faces to get him to smile. The ranch, which had once been so quiet and lonely, was now filled with the sounds of an infant, crying, cooing, and eventually laughing. It felt complete in a way it never had before. As winter gave way to spring, and Thomas grew from a newborn to a plump, happy baby, Nora reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. 2 years ago, she had been desperate and starving, with no future and no hope. Now she had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, and a home that was truly hers. The ranch prospered under Benjamin's careful management, and Nora took pride in her role as the heart of the household. One evening in late May, after Thomas had been put to bed and the house was quiet, Nora and Benjamin sat on the porch swing as they had so many times before. The air was warm and fragrant with the smell of the garden in bloom. Benjamin had his arm around Nora and she leaned into him, completely content. "You remember the day we met?" Benjamin asked. "Of course I do. How could I forget? You were so thin, so hungry, but you still had fire in your eyes. You were not broken, even though you had every reason to be." Benjamin kissed the top of her head. "I knew then that you were special. I just did not know how special you would become to me." "You gave me a feast that day," Nora said. "The first real meal I had eaten in so long, but more than that, you gave me dignity. You treated me like a person, not a charity case. You gave me a future when I could not see one for myself. And you gave me a reason to hope again," Benjamin replied. "You took this empty house and made it a home. You took my lonely existence and filled it with love and laughter. You gave me a son, Nora. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Nora corrected gently. "We saved each other, I think. You rescued me from physical starvation, and I rescued you from emotional starvation. We were both lost, and we found each other at exactly the right moment." "Maybe that is what love is," Benjamin mused. "Two lost souls finding each other and realizing they are not lost anymore because they have found home in each other." "That is beautiful," Nora said, tilting her head to look up at him. "And true. You are my home, Benjamin Porter. Not this house, not this ranch, but you. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Benjamin cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, long and deep and filled with all the love they shared. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, Nora thought about all the pain and struggle that had led her to this moment. She would not wish those hard times on anyone, but she also could not regret them entirely, because without them, she might never have been in that alley on that particular day when Benjamin Porter happened to walk by. The years that followed were full and busy. Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was curious and energetic, following Benjamin around the ranch whenever allowed, eager to learn about the cattle and the horses and everything involved in ranch life. When Thomas was 3, Nora became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was still difficult, she handled it with more confidence. In the summer of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Benjamin's mother. Sarah had Nora's delicate features and Benjamin's sturdy build. And from the moment she was born, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. He would bring her toys and sing to her in his childish voice, and when she was old enough to smile, her face always lit up when she saw him. The bond between the siblings was immediate and strong, and it made Nora's heart swell with joy to see her children growing up together in a loving home. The ranch continued to prosper. Benjamin proved to be a shrewd businessman as well as a skilled rancher, and he gradually expanded their operation. They bought more land, increased their herd, and hired additional help. Jack eventually retired, and Samuel took over as foreman, proving himself more than capable of managing the other workers. Through it all, the love between Nora and Benjamin only grew stronger. They had weathered difficulties together: harsh winters, a summer drought, an outbreak of illness among the cattle. But they always faced challenges as a team, supporting each other and working together to find solutions. They also celebrated triumphs together. A particularly good year for the herd, Thomas learning to ride his first horse, Sarah taking her first steps. By the time Thomas was 10 and Sarah was 7, the Porter Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the Oklahoma Territory. They had built a new, larger barn and expanded the house to include more bedrooms and a proper study for Benjamin. Nora had her own sewing room where she could work on her projects, and the children each had their own space. But despite their material success, what mattered most to both Nora and Benjamin was the family they had built together. Dinner time was sacred, a time when the whole family gathered around the table to share their day and enjoy each other's company. Sunday afternoons were reserved for family activities, picnics by the creek, rides around the property, or simply relaxing together on the porch. One evening in the autumn of 1892, after the children had been sent to bed, Nora sat at her dressing table brushing her hair while Benjamin got ready for bed. She caught his eye in the mirror and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how grateful I am," Nora replied. "For everything we have. For you, for our children, for this life we have built." Benjamin came up behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "I am grateful too. Every single day I wake up and marvel that you are mine, that we have created this family and this life together." "Do you ever think about that day in the alley?" Nora asked. "The day we met, all the time," Benjamin admitted. "It was the best decision I ever made, approaching you that day. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had just walked by. Where would you be? Where would I be? Somewhere much darker, I imagine," Nora said quietly. "I do not like to think about what might have happened to me if you had not stopped, but I did stop. And you said yes to my offer, and here we are, 10 years later with 2 beautiful children and a wonderful life." Benjamin squeezed her shoulders gently. "You were begging for scraps and I gave you a feast, but Nora, you gave me so much more in return. You gave me love, a family, a reason to get up in the morning beyond just survival. You gave me a future that is brighter than anything I could have imagined." Nora stood and turned to face her husband, wrapping her arms around his waist. "We gave each other a future. That is what makes it so special. It was not one-sided. We both needed saving and we saved each other." Benjamin held her close, and they stood like that for a long moment, finding comfort and strength in each other as they always had. Finally, Benjamin pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "I love you, Nora Porter. I have loved you since the day I saw you in that alley, and I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too," Nora replied, "always and forever." They went to bed that night as they did every night, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the love they shared and the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who took his role as the eldest child seriously. He loved ranch work and showed a natural aptitude for it, often working alongside his father from sunup to sundown. Sarah was more interested in books and learning, and Nora spent many happy hours teaching her daughter to read and do sums, watching her bright mind soak up knowledge. In 1895, Nora discovered she was pregnant once again. She was 35 years old, and this pregnancy was harder on her body than the previous 2 had been. Benjamin worried constantly, insisting she rest more and do less. The children helped out more around the house, with Thomas taking on additional chores and Sarah learning to cook simple meals. The baby, another boy they named Michael after Nora's father, was born in the spring of 1896. The labor was difficult, and the doctor warned Nora afterward that she should not have more children. It was dangerous for a woman her age, he said, and another pregnancy could kill her. Nora and Benjamin accepted this news with a mixture of sadness and relief. 3 children were a blessing, and they would not risk Nora's life for more. Michael was a happy baby who seemed to bring even more light into their home. Thomas and Sarah doted on their little brother, and the house was filled with even more laughter and chaos. Benjamin, now in his early 40s, proved to be just as devoted a father the third time around as he had been with their first two children. As the 19th century drew to a close and the 20th century began, the Porter family continued to thrive. Thomas, now a young man of 19, had taken on more responsibility at the ranch and was being groomed to eventually take it over. Sarah, 16 and beautiful, was being courted by the son of a neighboring rancher, much to Benjamin's consternation and Nora's amusement. Michael, still a young boy, was energetic and curious, keeping both his parents on their toes. The Oklahoma Territory had changed dramatically since Nora and Benjamin first met. What had once been open prairie was now dotted with towns and farms. The Indian Wars were over, and the land was being settled and civilized at a rapid pace. Oklahoma would soon become a state, everyone said, and the wild frontier was becoming a thing of the past. But some things never changed. The love between Nora and Benjamin remained as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch swing together in the evenings, still talked about everything and nothing, still held hands like newlyweds. Their partnership had been tested by time and circumstance, and it had only grown stronger. One evening in the summer of 1901, the entire family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Thomas sat on the steps, Sarah in the rocking chair, and Michael on the floor playing with a wooden horse Benjamin had carved for him. Nora and Benjamin shared the porch swing as always, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Tell us the story again," Michael said suddenly, looking up at his parents. "About how you met." "You have heard that story 100 times," Sarah said, but she was smiling because she loved the story too. "I never get tired of hearing it," Thomas added. "It is romantic." Nora and Benjamin exchanged a glance, and she could see the same memories reflected in his eyes that she was feeling. That desperate day in the alley, the meal that changed everything, the slow building of trust and love. "All right," Benjamin said, settling back in the swing. "It was the summer of 1882, and I had come into Oklahoma City for supplies. I happened to see a young woman trying to find work, and something about her caught my attention." "She was beautiful," Michael said, as if this was an accepted fact of the story. "She was," Benjamin agreed, smiling down at Nora. "But more than that, she was strong. Even though she was in a terrible situation, she had not given up. She had not lost herself. I was looking for scraps behind a hotel," Nora continued the story. "I had not eaten properly in days, and I was desperate. Then your father found me there. And he took her to a restaurant and bought her a feast," Sarah said, sighing happily. "The best meal I had ever tasted," Nora said. "Not because the food was so wonderful, though it was, but because it was given with kindness. Your father did not judge me or pity me. He simply helped me." "And then he brought her home and married her," Michael said, "and they lived happily ever after." "Well, there was a bit more to it than that," Benjamin said, laughing. "But yes, essentially that is what happened. I brought your mother home to work on the ranch, and we fell in love." "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Nora corrected gently. "The best decision was stopping in that alley in the first place." "You are right," Benjamin conceded. "That was the best decision. Everything good in my life stems from that moment." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and red. The air was warm and fragrant with the smell of prairie grass and growing things. In the distance, cattle lowed softly, and closer by, crickets began their evening song. Nora looked around at her family, at the home they had built, at the life they had created together, and she felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been 19 years ago, desperate and alone, thinking her life was over. If only she could have seen this future, could have known that all her suffering was leading to this moment of perfect contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Benjamin asked softly, as he had so many times over the years. "About how lucky I am," Nora replied. "About how one act of kindness from a stranger changed my entire life. About how love can heal even the deepest wounds." "I am the lucky one," Benjamin insisted. "You gave me a family, a home, a reason to live beyond just existing. You made me whole again." "We made each other whole," Nora said, the same truth they had spoken many times before. "That is what love does. It fills in the broken places and makes us better than we were alone." The children eventually went inside, leaving Nora and Benjamin alone on the porch as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They stayed there for a long time, holding each other, thinking their own thoughts, comfortable in the silence that only comes between two people who truly know each other. "You remember what you promised me that day?" Nora asked eventually. "When you first offered me the job." "I promised you a room, meals, and a fair wage," Benjamin said. "You promised me a future," Nora corrected. "You said you were giving me an opportunity for a future. And you were right. You gave me so much more than a job or a home. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me children and a family and a life beyond anything I could have dreamed." "And you gave me the same," Benjamin replied. "We were both lost, and we found each other." That is the real story, the one behind the simple tale we tell the children. Two broken people who came together and made something whole and beautiful. Nora turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 19 years of love and partnership and shared experience. When they pulled apart, both smiling, she rested her head on his shoulder and looked up at the stars. "I love you, Benjamin Porter. Thank you for seeing me that day in the alley. Thank you for not walking by. Thank you for giving me a feast and a future and a love that has sustained me for nearly 2 decades. I love you too, Nora Porter. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me." Benjamin held her closer. "You were begging for scraps and I gave you a feast. But you gave me a banquet that has fed my soul every day since. You gave me everything." They sat together under the stars. Two people who had found each other when they both needed saving, who had built a life and a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their love story had started with an act of kindness in an alley, but it had grown into something far greater, a partnership built on mutual respect and affection, a family that would carry on their values, and a home that would always be a sanctuary from the world. Inside the house, they could hear the children getting ready for bed, their voices calling to each other, the sounds of life and love and family. Thomas would take over the ranch someday, continuing what Benjamin's father had started and Benjamin had built. Sarah would marry and have children of her own, teaching them the same values her mother had taught her. Michael would grow up surrounded by love and security, never knowing the desperation his mother had faced before she met his father. The legacy of that day in the alley in 1882 would ripple forward through generations, the descendants of Nora and Benjamin Porter carrying forward the lessons their ancestors had learned. That kindness matters, that love heals, that everyone deserves a second chance, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. As the night deepened and the air grew cool, Nora and Benjamin finally went inside, arms around each other's waists, still as connected and in love as they had been on their wedding day. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, changed for bed, and slipped under the covers, finding each other in the darkness as they always did. "Good night, my love," Benjamin whispered, pulling her close. "Good night," Nora replied, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling his heartbeat beneath her cheek. "Dream sweet dreams. With you beside me, I always do." They fell asleep holding each other, two souls who had found their home, their future, and their forever in each other. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses in their stalls, the land resting under the vast Oklahoma sky. Everything was peaceful, everything was right, everything was exactly as it should be. The girl who had once begged for scraps behind a hotel was now a woman beloved by her husband and children, mistress of a successful ranch, and living proof that sometimes the darkest moments precede the brightest blessings. The lonely rancher who had given her a feast and a future had received far more in return. A love that transformed his existence, and a family that gave his life meaning. Their story was complete, their happy ending assured, their legacy established. And if the walls of the ranch house could speak, they would tell of laughter and love, of challenges overcome and triumphs celebrated, of a family built on the foundation of one man's kindness and one woman's courage. They would tell of a love that began in an alley and grew into something eternal, something that death itself could never diminish. This was their story, and it was beautiful.